This is the guests of the day. Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Kemi Omorugbe. In this video I want to show you how to make this Victorian corset. I made use of just the shoulder dart, but make use of your bust dart. It's also made as a tube with a detachable sleeve that can be used both ways. This video contains both the pattern drafting and the sewing tutorial, so we don't have much time. Without further ado, let's get to work. I'll be making use of my basic bodice block. I already have a tutorial on how to draft a full-scale basic bodice block. This particular one was created using the actual measurements of my client. I like to reduce the waist circumference by 2 inches, so that's why I dotted that half an inch away from the front block. The first major thing I'll be doing here is to tighten the waistline and the under bust line by 1 inch on both sides of the dart leg, and I connected these dots as usual. You know how you create a bustier, right? Now these darts will be cutting off eventually, right? Now note that when I was creating this pattern for the basic pattern, I usually add 1 inch along the waistline because of the width of the dart. So now my dart is additional 1 inch wider. So from the dot I marked here, I'm going to add that 1 inch back so that our waistline returns to the usual, you know, tightened face. Okay, so connected my dots right there, and here I am deciding on the upper chest line. I made use of 6.5 inches for this pattern, and from this point I measured half of the shoulder line, connected it straight up to the bust point along the bust line. So here I am tightening the upper chest line just so it sits better along the chest, and I'm just blending it to make it smooth rather than sharp, because you don't want any sharpness right there. So here at the side I created a slight S-shaped curve because this we are making as a tube, and then we'll create a detachable sleeve for it. Okay, so I just wanted that side to blend into the armhole. At the center you need to decide on the depth you are comfortable with. I made use of 2 inches and connected it to the dart leg like so, and this also will be cutting off at the end of the day. Right here our pattern is ready. I just need to cut this out. While doing that, don't forget to blend the shape of your hop right here, just so you don't have any shortage and your pattern sits right into each other. For the back block, I'm making use of my chest line, but then I didn't want it to be straight, so I slanted it by 1 inch like so. Next, I wanted to create a back opening for this corset, so I measured about 2 inches and just slanted it to the base of the pattern. On my waistline, I'm creating my dart right there using the midpoint of my pattern, and this is just the regular back width dart, except for the tightening on the chest line by half an inch, that is 1/4 of an inch on both sides of the dart leg. Now this wasn't planned, but I decided to play around with the shape of the neckline or the shape of the cup. Okay, so I placed the two sides of my front pattern together like so and extended it by about 2 inches. I just wanted to create like a spike on the top of the bust like so. So I raised that line upward and blended my armhole and also the neck depth as I'm showing. So I then cut off this pattern, separated the two sides again, and this is what I'll be transferring to fabric. Now while transferring these patterns to fabric, I made use of 1/2 inch seam allowance on the side, at the top, at the hem, and along the dark lines. Also, I did the same thing for the back. So once it's time to sew, we'll start by sewing in that 1/2 inch seam allowance. Of course, I ironed in fusible interfacing on my fabric. I also cut out lining pieces for each and every one of these. This is done, we want to create like a boning channel using bias tape on the front. I already created a tutorial on different ways, I think about 6 ways you can attach boning to your corset, so please refer to that video. Here I am making use of my bias tape. This is like the simplest method to go, and I sealed both sides of my bias tape on the bust line, at the center, and on the other bust line. So at this point I decided to add other boning channels, and even though this can be planned from the pattern, but it wasn't initially planned into this, so I just drew a line on where on the position I wanted the new boning channel on both sides of this front piece, seal in my bias tape. So now I am making use of this tape. It was a bit wide, so I trimmed the side seam allowance. I was careful enough not to cut into the strands that make up the bones. Okay, so having done that, I inserted my bones into the channels, and this is what we have. So for these ones that pass through the bust cup, you don't want to insert it up until the bust. You just stop at the under bust so that there will be room for you to insert your cup without the bones, you know, compressing the bust. So here's my lining. I decided to interface the top of this lining with a hard fusible interfacing just because of those spikes, so that it stands well. And we'll be sewing in the neckline for both the front and the back by 1/2 inch at the top. Okay, so having done that, this is what I have right here. Remember that the cup side of this doesn't have boning, so it's soft, while the other part has some structure to it. It's now time for me to insert my cups, and here I am just testing out the cup and trying to position them in my most preferred way. And you have the room to trim probably the sides of your cup if it's slightly bigger, and you can also adjust by like sewing in a dart into your cup so that it looks more rounded if that's what you want. So but for this I didn't do any of that. Yeah, I actually trimmed the part of it, but first position this very well. Make sure that the left and the right side looks similar. Check it, pin it before you go ahead to sew, because it can be, you know, dicey to create a symmetrical look for this. So having pinned this on my actual fabric, I turned it around, checked it out, I was sure I was okay with it. Then I pinned it on the lining just so I can stitch it on the lining, because you won't be stitching on the main fabric, you're stitching on the lining. So guys, while I created this pattern, did you notice that I didn't close up the bust dart? Like I didn't even mark out the bust dart on my pattern. My hormonal brain has been acting up and I've been quite forgetful lately. But yeah, I did this without my bust dart. But what that means, if you use the pattern we used, is that the front is longer than the back. But I'll show you what I eventually did. So at that point I felt like recreating this outfit like transferring the pattern to another fabric, recreating the pattern and transferring it to another fabric. But then I felt, let's see how this goes, let's see how this looks without the bust dart. Let's create this just using that shoulder dart. I was just curious to see the outcome. Now these are the points where I tagged my cup at the sides, then at the base. You can also just sew along the dart line. So this is my back piece. I am closing up the center back, and I did the same thing on the other side. I'll be joining the front and back piece together along the side seam, and in doing this, just leave the excess length that the front has on the side, because I'll be trimming it off at the end of the day. That creates a little bit of imbalance, but I didn't notice the effect on the corsets when we were through. So this is what we have, the side seams joined. You can also create multiple boning channels for the back as well, but I didn't do that for this pattern. So now I am going to sew seams, 3 seams ½ inch apart from the center back, and this I top stitch, okay, both the lining and the fabric, so that we can create a channel for the boning at the center back. So this way I'll be inserting the boning into the first space and the third space, leaving the middle one for the eyelets. Now I also have a detailed tutorial on 3 methods of closure you can use for your corsets. I'll link it up above and in the description box. So at this stage I am trimming off the sides of the front piece just so it balances up with the back. Okay, don't try this at home, this is not recommended. This is just me trying to still make things work despite my error. So at the base of this corset I will be piping to close up the hem. We are not using the lining to turn, we are using a bias strip cut out from my lining to turn it. But before doing that, make sure that you pin both the lining and the main fabric together properly, make sure they align properly, and then you do your piping. So this is what I have. I did like an inner piping so that it doesn't show on the right side. You can only see the seam I top stitch from the front, but from the back this is what we have here. I went ahead to attach the eyelet as well, as you can see from here. So I'll be setting this aside so that we can do some little work on the sleeve. I'll be making use of this piece of fabric. It is just a straight cut. I think it was around 20 inches ish. I'm not even very sure. I'm not very sure of the length, but it depends on how full you want it to look at the end of the day. Okay, so this is what I have right here. I put like a strip somewhere along the line, just kind of combine my fabric in a funny way. You can actually be creative with this. So I folded the top of this piece to create a channel for my elastic, and I did the same thing at the middle. You see that part where I joined the satin with the ankara, and I also did the same thing at the hem. I actually used like double piece for the hem, so I can insert my elastic on 3 different positions of this. So here I inserted the elastic, sealed the side seams, and that is what gave me this sleeve. So we have 2 of these, of course, and this is how it looks. You can actually use this sleeve both ways. You can turn it the other way, turn it. So basically you can use this outfit as a tube corset, and you can turn the sleeve either way. So with this, we have come to the end of this tutorial. You can see that the cup isn't that bad. Okay, it could have been better with the bust dart being transferred to the shoulder dart to add more fullness for the cup, but I am not mad at this. It looks so good on the wearer. Thank you, see you in the next video.